for News Defense, your weekly look into security, intelligence, and strategic affairs. In this edition, with scores of attacks in months targeting Israelis, most in the West Bank, an IDF battalion commander shares his perspective from the field. And the bigger picture of defense in 2015, when tremors from the Middle East caused shockwaves around the world. The wave of terror targeting Israelis has persisted for over 3 months now, and while much attention is paid to the lone wolf attacks in central Israel, a look at the numbers reveals that the West Bank is at the heart of violence. Here's a quick look at where the attacks are stemming from and who is carrying them out.
The recent cycle of violence between Israel and the Palestinians escalated in September in a series of stabbings, shootings, car rammings, Molotov cocktails, and stone throwing. The numbers and data tell the story behind what some are calling the lone wolf intifada. The Israeli military's data states that by December 19th, 93 stabbings, 34 shootings, 19 car rammings, and hundreds of Molotov cocktail attacks took place. Information gathered and analyzed by the Israeli Security Agency exposes the unique nature of this recent wave. 73% of all attacks occurred in the West Bank, 18% in Jerusalem, and 9% elsewhere within Israel. Most attackers, 78% of them, also originated from the West Bank. 20% reside in and around Jerusalem, and only 2% are from other areas. 12% of attackers were female. Their young age also stands out. 8% of attackers were minors, 37% under the age of 20, and 39% under 25. The numbers show the bigger picture of the struggle on the ground to find a short-term and particularly a long-term solution.
Earlier, we spoke with the commander of the IDF Kedem battalion in the West Bank. Lieutenant Colonel Elad Edri, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
What are we witnessing here? Is it an intifada, a wave of terror? How would you define the situation?
Well, from my point of view, we're not witnessing an intifada. Actually, what we see is a terror of wave of terror.
It seems that recent days show a decrease in the number of attacks. Is that your sense too?
Yeah, we actually feel the escalation, and the people here in the field can actually feel the escalation of the attacks. Most of them are attacks of bombs and firing.
But most attacks are launched with knives. How do your soldiers deal with the threat of stabbing?
Actually, for the past 2 months, my unit has experienced 2 attempts which hurt my soldiers. The first was about 2 months ago, when a terrorist came to Adam Square and stabbed one of my soldiers. She was a female, and the other soldier shot him and actually killed him. The other attempt was only 2 weeks ago in the village of Aluben, when a terrorist hit 4 of my warriors, which were on a mission on the road, and he came with his car and hit them. And the 4 of them were injured.
So what do you do? Do you prevent contact between Palestinians and your troops?
The most important thing we do is, first of all, to explain the soldiers that they can't give the enemy the opportunity to hit them. We put them in big numbers, in 4s or 6 soldiers in every mission, and to watch themselves and look around them, and especially to be aware that to the fact that in every minute and in every second they can be hit by a terrorist which will try to use the opportunity to do that.
Where do the majority of Palestinians stand in this conflict? How many actually come into confrontation with you?
From my point of view, most of them are not involved. And this is a thing we should say, because the number of people that try to conflict with the army, with our soldiers, is very little. let's say that we separate between the terrorists that try to hurt the soldiers and the citizens here, and those which are not involved. And one of my missions here is not to hurt the people that are not involved, and to give them the opportunity to keep on with their lives by going to school, going to work, the freedom of movement, and etc.
What about the Palestinian security forces? Do they take a stand in this conflict?
Actually, until now, the cooperation between us is very good. We are very coordinated in our actions, and when we have to work with them, it goes very good. Until now, I hope it will continue the same way.
Lieutenant Colonel Edri at the Beitounia checkpoint, thank you very much for this. In 2015, the continuing chaos of the Syrian war, the rapid rise of the Islamic State, and the refugee crisis in Europe shed light on one major reality, that everything is connected. And that lesson was learned time and again, this year from Paris to California.
With an ever-growing flow of migrants and refugees entering Europe and blood spilled in the streets of Paris and San Bernardino, 2015 will be remembered as the year the Middle East, with its wars and turmoil, had profound global impact. The Islamic State group that took root and dismantled Iraq and the chaos of Syria proved its reach goes far. One wake-up call came in October, when the Egyptian affiliate of the terror group brought down a Russian plane over the Sinai Peninsula. 224 people were killed in the crash. Hundreds of foreigners have joined IS, some to the battlefields in Syria or Iraq, others showing support by bringing horrific terror tactics home to Paris or California. In November, a series of coordinated attacks hit the City of Light. Suicide bombers and mass shootings took the lives of 130 people and injured hundreds. The attacks were perpetrated by a number of Europeans. As the year came to a close, even California became a target when a young married couple killed 14 people and wounded nearly 24 in San Bernardino. Syed Farouk, an American-born Muslim radicalized from afar, became yet another example of the global reach of terror. And it's not just terror entering the streets of Western cities. It's 1 million migrants and refugees knocking on Europe's doors, seeking to escape the same violence. All these facts on the ground have drawn involvement back into Iraq and Syria, from U.S., French, and British airstrikes to American special forces on the ground and deepening Russian intervention. In short, the tremors stemming from the Middle East aren't likely to stop anytime soon.
And joining me now in the studio is Nadav Eyal, Chief International Correspondent for Channel 10. Pleasure to have you here.
It's a pleasure being here.
We've been talking in 2015 about the flood of Middle Easterns going throughout the world, but what are the actual numbers?
The actual numbers are way more than 1 million people. When we say 1 million people, we're just talking about the people who entered Europe, most of them through the sea. But we have also a land route into Europe, which operates mainly through Asia. And what we are seeing right now is not these million people that everybody's talking about. This is an assessment by the 31st of December, but actually more than 1 million people, and the numbers just keep on coming, although it's winter. And there was an assessment that there would be a decrease because crossing the sea, crossing the Mediterranean is much harder during winter, but what we are seeing is a rise in these numbers all the time.
You've spent quite a bit of time on the beaches of Europe and inside the continent with the refugees, prepared an extensive report. Let's watch a clip from it.
Okay.
البلم لأن العدد ما بيحمل العدد كبير 50 خلاص نحن فينا 13
They don't have respect for nobody. They destroy the economy. They destroy the citizens. Thank you. Welcome in Europe.
You leave them. Miss them.
נדב אייל יוצא למסע בעקבות נדידת העמים הגדולה שמשנה את פניה של אירופה.
What are you looking for in Europe?
I'm looking for peace, only peace, not money, peace.
Does anyone know who are these people?
Well, we are sort of having some sort of demographics about them. We know that these are people who come with families. We know that most of them are men. So there is a higher percentage of men there. And the reason for that, some argue that the reason is that it's because they are coming and they're seeking work. And to an extent that's true, but the actual reason is that they are coming because the Syrians have started to massively bring them into the army. So Syrian men didn't have to go into the army until recently, and since there is a recruitment duty enforced by the Assad regime, they have now an incentive to leave. And that's the reason we're seeing more men. And we know that they are coming from levels of society which are relatively well off. And I need to say relatively because it's after years of war, and Syria is anyway a weak and impoverished country. But the people who are coming are people who have the facilities, the know-how. They will go on the net. They will investigate the way to come into Europe. They will amass a certain amount of money after years of war, thousands of dollars per head in a family, so they'll be able to cross the sea. Some of them will understand they need to work in Turkey in order to do that. This is the elite. The people that are leaving are the elite. The real elite already left, of course, because they had houses, overseas, and they could just leave to their flat in London. But inside that elite,
how many of those would become the future terrorists of Europe?
Oh, there's absolutely no doubt, and we saw that in the Paris attacks, that amongst these people, there would be terrorists. I met refugees in Germany, in Berlin, and in Frankfurt that told me, in the refugee camps, in Europe, people just came, are arguing on behalf of ISIS, of Daesh. They are talking on behalf of Daesh. They are fighting with people who criticize Daesh. So there is absolutely no doubt that there are sympathizers of terror within them, and there are terrorists there. But if you ask about the incentive, the motivation, it's obvious that this is not people. These are not people that are looking for radical Islam.
But how alerted are the European intelligence agencies in monitoring surveillance on these people?
Well, first of all, there is no real surveillance. These people are crossing the border illegally. So you cannot have a real surveillance on them because nobody is really checking their passports until they reach Germany. They don't want to bring the passports to anyone before they reach Germany. And these passports, and you probably know that, Alon, some of them are stolen. And we already know that Daesh has a passport machine, a passport printing machine in Syria that they catched in Raqqa. And they can probably issue any original Syrian passport. And you also have these Iraqis and Afghans which have lost their papers. And what you actually see is that they can buy a Syrian passport. Syrian passport is, a very good commodity in the world today because it gives you an entry into Europe and the Western world. They have to accept you.
And we've seen the Europeans and the Americans, more than them, trying to distance themselves from the Middle East, to detach from this region. Yeah. But the region is coming back to bite them. Is this going to be the story for 2016?
I think that the story is the way that Europe and the West are reacting. And we should take a close look at the way that Turkey and the European Union are starting to negotiate, because this is the real attempt. The person who can stop this, number one, is Assad. Assad started printing out passports. He wanted us to have this discussion today. He wanted the West to understand that the Syrian civil war is not going anywhere and it might influence them, so that there will be some sort of a solution, which is not a divine solution of bringing him out of power. So the first person is Assad. He wanted a mass immigration. It doesn't sound logical, but we know this for a fact. And the other one is, of course, Erdogan. Erdogan is allowing them to cross through Turkey. The biggest thing that changed is that the route through Libya and the sea, which is highly dangerous and expensive for people who are coming from Syria because of it, you have to cross through Egypt and through Jordan and through Sudan sometimes in order to reach Libya. And that's an extremely dangerous route. This has become less of an interest for them because Turkey has opened actually its borders and is allowing massive amounts of people to cross into Greece. And if the Turkish authorities stop this, we won't see hundreds of thousands of Syrians in Europe. And this is exactly the kind of deal that the EU is signing with Turkey. And the Turkish government can stop this, I won't say, with the blink of its eye, but definitely using some of its power. In a few months, we can see a dramatic decrease of refugees coming into Europe, and I think it's already begun.
But right now, not being forced to make a choice. Nadav Eyal, Chief International Correspondent for Channel 10. Thank you very much for being with us.
And
that's all we have time for. Be sure to visit us again next week for another edition of I-24 News Defense. For all the latest headlines, log on to i24news.tv. Have a safe night from the Jaffa Port and Merry Christmas.